Why is it that the richest nations, living in a time of just unprecedented wealth and safety and convenience, why are they also seeing record high rates of anxiety, depression, and chronic pain? It just feels completely counterintuitive.
It absolutely is. I mean, we have more access to instant pleasure than any generation in history, and yet we seem to be fundamentally less happy.
Yeah.
Dr. Anna Lembke, she's a psychiatrist at Stanford. She specializes in addiction, and she offers this simple but kind of terrifying answer in her book, Dopamine Nation.
And what's that?
We are actually working too hard to avoid being miserable.
That overabundance is the very thing stressing our systems. Welcome to Nonfiction Insights. This is where we break down big ideas from nonfiction books so you can actually understand them. And this deep dive is all about Lemke's phenomenal work.
Yeah, our mission today is to really unpack that core concept she presents, the pleasure-pain balance. We're going to explain how our, relentless chase for quick, easy dopamine is literally tipping our internal neurobiological scale toward chronic unhappiness.
And crucially, how we can reset it.
Exactly. We're moving from a philosophical problem to a neurobiological solution.
Okay, so let's unpack that core mechanism first. Lemke's whole idea is built on the discovery that pleasure and pain aren't separate things.
Right. They're not two different processes.
They're actually processed in overlapping regions of the brain. They function like a single physical balance, a seesaw.
And that internal seesaw, its whole job is to maintain a neutral baseline. It's what scientists call homeostasis. So when nothing's really happening, the balance is level.
Okay.
But when you experience pleasure, say you're scrolling TikTok or eating a great dessert, dopamine spikes, and that balance tips, hard to the pleasure side.
But the very moment that happens, the brain's self-correcting mechanisms kick in with just absolute force.
It hates being out of balance. It's designed to fight that.
And this ancient system, this evolved system, is now facing an existential crisis.
Yeah, because of this unprecedented access we have to super potent high dopamine stimuli. We're talking about, chemicals manipulated to be 10 times stronger than anything our ancestors ever encountered.
The numbers she cites are just staggering. I mean, potent drugs like amphetamines, they can release 1,000% more dopamine than baseline.
1,000%. But it's not just the illegal drug. It's the technology. The smartphone is now, the modern-day hypodermic needle?
That's the famous quote.
And it's the hyper-palatable foods engineered with the perfect amount of sugar, salt, fat, all to guarantee the biggest possible dopamine release.
So our brains evolved for scarcity.
For a world where reward was rare and you had to work for it. And now we're just drowning in pleasure.
That's a powerful image, but, couldn't you say it sounds a little alarmist? Haven't humans always struggled with temptation? With excess?
Sure, you had Roman excesses, Victorian gluttony.
Right, so what makes our situation, our chemistry, fundamentally different?
It's the intensity. It's the sheer potency. Ancient temptations just didn't exist at this level. Lembke puts it perfectly. She says, we are cacti in the rainforest.
Cacti in the rainforest.
Yeah, our systems are evolved to hold on to water in the desert, and now we're just being flooded with these highly concentrated pleasure chemicals that are literally rewiring us.
Okay, so the central idea is pretty simple. The pursuit of pleasure leads to pain. But isn't that just another way of saying too much of a good thing is bad? What does the neurobiology, this opponent process theory, what does that actually add to that old piece of advice?
It adds the mechanism. It explains why the pain response ends up being stronger. So the opponent process theory states that every single bit of pleasure you experience triggers a necessary, equal, and opposite pain response to try and get that balance back to level.
I love Lemke's metaphor for this. She calls them the Neuroadaptation Gremlins. The Gremlins, yes. They're like the brain's little cleanup crew. Whenever we get a dopamine spike, these imaginary gremlins hop onto the pain side of the balance to push it back down.
Exactly. But here's the really critical part. The gremlins don't just restore the balance to level, they actually stay on the pain side longer, and more of them show up than the initial pleasure really warranted.
So they overcompensate.
They overcompensate. It's the lasting biological effort required to pull that seesaw back to the middle.
So if we keep hitting the pleasure side again and again, constantly scrolling, constantly snacking, just constantly consuming high dopamine stuff,
those gremlins accumulate, they build up, and they permanently tip the balance toward the pain side.
Right.
And this constant, prolonged stimulation causes the brain to reset what's called its hedonic set point.
Okay, wait, you just used two bits of jargon. Let's clarify. Hedonic set point.
Right. It's basically the brain's internal measurement of what normal feels like.
So it's your baseline for feeling okay.
Precisely. And that baseline eventually rests permanently on the side of pain, which means you need more and more external stimulation just to feel level.
And that leads to the other term. If we keep chasing pleasure, the paradox is that hedonism leads to anhedonia.
Anhedonia.
So what does that actually feel like for someone?
It's the inability to enjoy pleasure of any kind. Because the scale is so tipped toward pain, you now need this huge amount of reward just to feel a little bit of pleasure, and you need very little injury to feel a lot of pain.
So you just feel miserable all the time.
All the time. And simple, natural rewards, like watching a sunset or having a good conversation, they just don't register anymore.
That perfectly explains the misery paradox we started with. But here's where the logic kind of breaks down for me.
Okay.
If chasing pleasure only leads to misery, and people feel terrible all the time, why do they relapse? Why does the brain keep pushing people to seek out that hit if pain is the guaranteed outcome?
That is the central confusion, and it's where this term dysphoria-driven relapse comes in. The user, or the person engaging in the behavior, they are no longer craving it to feel pleasure. The euphoria is long gone.
So what are they craving?
They're seeking it simply to alleviate the profound physical and psychological suffering of withdrawal.
So it's not about getting high anymore. It's about escaping an unbearable low, just trying to feel normal again.
Just to get the seesaw back to level ground, even for a moment. And we have some pretty striking neurological data that confirms this. I mean, studies show that even 2 weeks after heavy users stop, their brain's reward pathway often shows little to no dopamine transmission.
So they're in a deep deficit.
A profound deficit state. And that drives this intense craving just to survive the withdrawal. It feels like a nonstop high-level anxiety.
And this applies even to behaviors, right? Not just drugs.
Oh, absolutely. Especially where anticipation is the key. Lembke notes that, for instance, pathological gamblers show the highest dopamine release not when they win.
But when they lose, I remember that part. It's paradoxical.
It is. It drives the urge of loss chasing. That uncertainty and the desperate urge to get back to even, that's the powerful driver.
It's the maximum uncertainty that reinforces the loop, which she suspects is similar to, the uncertain reward of getting a like or a notification on social media.
The maybe is as addictive as the yes. Precisely.
So if we rebuild the explanation now, addiction isn't a moral failure. It's not a lack of willpower.
Not at all. It's a structural failure. The goal has fundamentally shifted from seeking pleasure to desperately just avoiding pain. The whole system's been hijacked.
And Lembke makes this so relatable by sharing her own struggle, which wasn't with a street drug, but with something that seems so harmless.
Erotic romance novels.
Yeah, formulaic erotic romance novels. She became a chain reader, consuming them instead of sleeping, cooking, paying attention to her family.
And when she tried to stop for just 24 hours.
She was genuinely shocked to experience restlessness, agitation, anxiety. Classic symptoms of withdrawal.
And this is so critical for you, the listener, to hear, because it shows that even these relatively harmless compulsive behaviors, when you use them consistently to escape or to numb out,
they can trigger the same opponent process.
Exactly. And cause real symptoms of tolerance and withdrawal that interfere with your ability to enjoy your actual life.
Okay, so if chasing easy pleasure is the core of the problem,
Yeah.
if it leads to this deep deficit state, how do we get adaptive, healthy dopamine without tipping the whole seesaw into collapse?
Well, Lemke suggests we have to intentionally invite pain and discomfort into our lives.
Invite pain. That sounds awful.
I know, but this is the science of hormesis. It describes the beneficial effects of administering small to moderate doses of noxious stimuli.
Like what?
Think intense exercise, cold exposure, heat, things that are initially uncomfortable.
So hormesis literally means to set in motion. You subject your body to a mild acute stress, like a cold plunge or a really tough workout.
And it forces your neurochemistry to adapt and respond positively.
But wait, intense exercise releases dopamine. Caffeine releases dopamine. How is that functionally different in the brain from the dopamine I get doom scrolling?
That's a great question. The difference is in the payoff structure, the context. Hormesis requires you to pay for your dopamine upfront.
Upfront, okay.
When you start exercising, your neurotransmitters are low. That's the initial pain, the discomfort, the effort. You feel miserable, but you keep going.
Right, and because you push through that initial pain.
Your neurotransmitter levels, including dopamine, they slowly rise. And then, and this is key, they remain elevated and stable for hours afterward.
So you get the feel-good experience without that immediate crash. You don't go into the dopamine deficit state later?
You've earned it through initial effort. It creates a much more sustained, healthier curve. You're not depleting the cash reserves, which is what happens with instant gratification. It builds resilience.
Okay, so let's get practical. If you're listening and you suspect your balance is tipped toward pain because of, modern indulgence, what is the first step back to a level state?
Clinically, the first and most essential step is abstinence.
From the drug of choice or the compulsive behavior?
For a sustained period, usually at least 4 weeks. That's about the average time needed for the brain's reward pathways to start resetting that hedonic set point, for dopamine transmission to regenerate itself.
And to get through that really tough period when the gremlins are basically having a party on the pain side of the scale.
You need to use self-binding.
Which is not about willpower.
No, it's about structurally limiting your access to the thing. It's a fantastic, non-moral strategy. Think of the myth of Odysseus tying himself to the mast to resist the sirens.
Right. He made the decision when he was rational, before the overwhelming craving hit.
You create a structural barrier between your current self and your future compulsive self.
And we can break this down into 3 categories. So first, there's physical binding.
Right, like locking up an expensive bottle of wine and giving the key to your partner.
Then there's chronological binding.
Which is limiting use to very specific, narrow times, like you only check social media on Sunday mornings or only after 8 p.m. You make the behavior less automatic.
And finally, categorical binding.
This is avoiding triggers beyond the drug of choice itself.
Like the example of the patient addicted to sports betting.
Exactly. He had to stop watching sports on TV, stop reading the sports page, stop listening to sports radio entirely. You have to avoid the cues that set off that craving cascade.
It's about recognizing that the environment is so often the problem, not your character.
Yes. You constrain the environment when you're rational to protect yourself for when you're craving.
We mentioned intentional discomfort earlier, and there's a really powerful patient story that combines abstinence with this hormesis idea.
You're talking about the patient who used cold water immersion?
Of physically painful activity.
Yeah.
He used it to reset his dopamine baseline after struggling with severe substance use.
And what's so fascinating about his story is that the cold plunge didn't just give him a clean, earned dopamine boost. It also became a positive, shared social activity with friends.
It replaced the social ritual of his former drug use.
Yeah, which was always focused on getting high together. He swapped destructive bonding for adaptive, healthy bonding.
So if we synthesize all of this into one final crucial lesson, it seems we need to accept that living a good life involves tolerating some boredom, some discomfort. The goal isn't peak happiness all the time.
No, the goal is a flexible, resilient balance.
We have to strengthen our mental calluses.
Exactly. Gaining confidence in our ability to tolerate anxiety and frustration and boredom without needing an immediate escape. If you can just sit with the discomfort, you are fundamentally more powerful.
By accepting the low, by leaning into that intentional discomfort, you actually make space for the true adaptive high.
Like the intense rush of warmth and connection that comes from true intimacy, from radical honesty with yourself and with other people.
That's the kind of truth-telling that creates sustainable endogenous dopamine.
It's the earned pleasure that builds true resilience, not the cheap, compulsive shortcut that destroys it.
So today, we dove deep into Dr. Lembke's central idea that in our age of instant indulgence, constantly chasing pleasure is what's tipping our brain's internal balance toward chronic pain and anxiety. Yeah. We learned about the neuroadaptation gremlins, how we get trapped in dysphoria-driven relapse, and how intentional discomfort through hormesis and self-binding can actually reset our tolerance for genuine joy.
So now, think about the one thing you use compulsively for escape right now. What would happen if you were radically honest about its real impact? And what kind of intentional, upfront pain, a cold shower, a difficult workout, deleting an app, could you introduce this week to start earning back your balance?
If you found these insights valuable and you want a shortcut to being truly well-informed, hit that subscribe button. We make complex nonfiction ideas clear and actionable, so you can stop just reading the books and start actually using the knowledge.
Thank you for joining the deep dive
On Nonfiction Insights.